Welcome back. It's been lunch, and I'm very excited to be sitting with the CEO of GetYourGuide. So I have a question. You basically are doing a keynote later, and I want to know exactly what message you're going to send to people and what you're going to tell people here at ITB.
Sure. Nick, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. The key piece that I'll be talking about today is actually about how big data is changing travel. So we increasingly see a divide between the players that actually harvest big data and machine learning in order to make more intelligent recommendations to travelers and attract travelers in a much more efficient way, and those players who frankly don't do it. And you see a tremendous difference in growth and capturing market share between these two groups, and that's what I'll be talking about, and how you can basically move from being a small or slow moving player into a champion that can actually take advantage of the scope of technology that's available today.
Ctrip showed on stage how they're using data too. So this is a big thing, right? Because you can actually personalize products, understand your customers more. What are you guys doing with that data? What are some of the things that you guys are seeing and using?
Well, we have, I'd say, 2 to 3 main areas where we're working with data. One is actually in the predictive algorithms, where we try to figure out what a customer is actually going to be worth for us, depending on which part of the travel funnel that person enters. Whether that's stuff like very high intent, from Google, where someone is searching for an Eiffel Tower ticket, they already know exactly what they want to do, and that sort of like customers obviously worth a lot to us because they're very likely to convert. Or whether they're still sort of like more in a planning mode and sort of like much further up the funnel. Maybe clicking on sort of like an inspirational ad on Instagram or so, where I'm far away from the travel purchase decision, but I still want to get to know the brand and flip through the inventory. And that entire piece is quite difficult to work out, because you need to have very smart machines that kind of like cluster the different customer intents and traffic sources, and frankly price them and make sure that we price that accurately. So that's one area. Then the other area I would say that we're really focusing on is in the recommendation algorithms to customers. Depending on who you are and what you're looking for in a destination, a very different set of inventory is relevant. If you've already been to Paris 5-10 times, right, so it's very unlikely that you'll be interested in the Eiffel Tower. That said, if you're a family that's coming into Paris for the first time, it's very likely that Disneyland is relevant for you, right? So the results page is that we need to show you, and the inventory that we need to surface to you is widely different dependent on the customer. So that entire area of the personalization is very important. And then the last piece is really about the long-term relationship with the customer, and that is about how can we reach out to them again at a relevant time points. When, for instance, you're just landing again on your next trip in Paris, or when the right window is for you to get inspired the next time, and teaching the machines to make intelligent decisions on when you can be relevant and with what type of content. That's also very big part of big data and machine learning for us.
That's a lot, right? That's a lot of stuff.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So in the next massive. 5 to 10 years, you'll be seeing travel companies doing that and doing that very well, and those will win, and the others who don't do that will lose.
Because one of the critical pieces is that you'll be able to be more efficient with your marketing spend, right? Because it costs you a certain amount to get a customer, and if you're spending $100 for a customer and spends $50, loss. If you
look at the travel landscape today, in online, you will see that the cost of people is negligent at this point in time. The Priceline, Expedia, Ctrip, GetYourGuide, the staff that we employ by now is such a small part of our P&L, versus the marketing cost just continues to explode. For the benefit of Google and Facebook and everyone else. So making that more efficient is really the name of the game.
And it's actually for the end user. I mean, even for Facebook and Google, they want that, and they should theoretically help with that too, because users want to see relevant ads.
Absolutely, and that's why ultimately we've seen over the last 10 years that in every category, whether that's hotels, alternative accommodation, in destination activities, you will see 2, 3, maybe 4, if at all, winners that can harness all that data and can be good partners to the Facebooks and Googles, so the consumer-facing advertisement companies, and the others just don't have as good of a shot.
So it takes a lot of money to do these consumer businesses.
That's exactly why we raise so much cash, right?
75 million, for everyone who didn't know that. It's a big amount of money. So what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, so it might sound like a lot to you, but GetYourGuide is not a very young company anymore. We have very significant revenues. And for us, basically that cash was not to be burned on like some crazy sort of like Mars-like project, but it was really just to fuel the build-up of the technology in our core areas and make sure that we still remain independent and can keep a long-term vision, right? Our space gets increasingly competitive. You see all the big household names now trying to take a stab at it, and we want to make sure that we remain in a position where we can invest and grow to become the globally leading player in that space.
And that was a Series B. Right?
It was Series D, actually.
D. Okay, that's what I was trying. Because I was thinking, as you go down the line, so that makes more sense. Because I was like, if it's a
it
series,
doesn't really matter, to be honest.
Well, in the sense, it only matters in like how you, how much you think you need before you're going to either sell or go public. In the sense that you keep going. Sometimes now you have Series F, you keeps going down that line.
Well, the capital markets have changed tremendously, right? So if you would have thought of GetYourGuide 15 years ago, I mean, like we wouldn't need to prepare for public offering right now. In fact, we'd be a perfectly legit, public company at this point in time. Now, you have all these players in the late stage markets that want to help companies to stay private for longer, so that they can just grow and grab more market share. And I think that's really beneficial for entrepreneurs.
And for those entrepreneurs who may be watching, how did you get to this point? You have been around for a while, and a lot of tears, sweat. I always use that analogy. But how did you get to this point? And would you make a recommendation to take larger financing because it is maybe easier for certain businesses to get financing, or really only take what you need? Walk us through how you decide to get your financing at the certain points in your business.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it really always depends on what type of business you are, but generally if you're in technology, you want to target a very large market first. If you have a very large market in sight, so a very big prize to win as the globally leading platform in that market that you're in. And travel, tends to be one of these mega markets. Like even every sub-market of travel is like still $100 billion market. If that's the case, you want to raise as much cash as you can, because at the end of the day, it's not about optimizing for dilution at a given round, but it's actually optimizing for market share in the end game that will come up. Because if you're really serious about what you're doing, particularly in travel, then for sure the top 5 travel companies in the world will compete with you at some point, and you need to be geared up for that battle. So I think that's why we definitely chose to go very aggressive in terms of funding, and like any other company that is in a similar dynamic, I'd recommend to do the same thing.
So you're ramping up data operations, I'm assuming. It's already existing, but some of that's probably going to that. Is that correct assumption?
Correct.
Okay.
I would say product, engineering, design, all of that is a key element of what we're investing in. It's a key element, frankly, that every digital travel company invests in heavily right now. And we definitely see an accelerating race right now in sort of building up these tech functionalities in-house. And even some of the big players, I would say, are not as advanced as you might think, but this will change dramatically over the next 2 years.
What skill sets are being the most competitively sought right now? As companies raise big rounds and you have the existing players pulling in data people, what are you seeing as the harder to find occupations or skill sets?
Well, I can speak from the lens of Europe, and I'd say that for us, it's definitely all of the data positions. So handling and dealing with large-scale data, and sort of like building algorithms that make smart decisions. That's definitely something where we don't have as many people yet, because we also just haven't built, the gigantic internet companies. I mean, Spotify went public last week. I think that's stuff like, one of the first really big, large-scale global players with a lot of data. We have Booking.com, which I guess a European company. But apart from that, there aren't that many. So we kind of lack that part of expertise. What we also see lacking is, frankly, experienced product managers who can lead engineering teams and software engineering projects. As well as tier 1 designers. I think is also just something that the US has more of. I think in general Silicon Valley just has the big advantage that they've had a lot of very big large scale consumer internet companies over the last 10-20 years, and so the talent pool is just a lot deeper than what we can deal with here. China on the flip side, we see ramping up these resources very, very quickly. There's a big focus of the government on that to do that and give that education to people, and they also have a increasingly large amount of big companies. So it's really something that we need more of in Europe.
And it's interesting, I was reading in Business Week that a lot of Chinese folks are returning from Silicon Valley back to China for these big problems. So it's almost like, people are going back too. So you have all these PhDs returning to China, and there's only so many PhDs with data science backgrounds. It's pretty interesting. So if you're in college, study data. That seems to be the lesson, right? As data science, I mean, should everybody have some knowledge of how to use data? Even the product managers, the designers?
Yeah, that certainly will be a requirement for most jobs. I mean, I'd still recommend that people study what they are passionate about first and foremost, because if you're not passionate about doing something, there's no use in it. I mean, you can be a great reporter in the 21st century as well, and that's also like a great skill, right? Not that many around these days.
I may be gone at the end of this one. Yeah. Today I will see.
Yeah, no, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think you should do what you're passionate about. Yeah. But most jobs in the next 10, 20 years will require I think a very deep understanding of how to deal with large sets of data.
So let's pivot a little bit into travel trends, traveler trends, your customers. Are you noticing anything in particular about certain types of bookings that are happening, or lead times, or has there just been anything interesting that has kind of piqued your curiosity for your customers? I mean,
what we're continuously seeing is a strong shift towards mobile, which continues. So it's been there for many years, but I think the velocity at which it's happening now is really unprecedented. I think we're at a point where it's fair to say that in 5 to 10 years, very, very few people will book travel on desktop.
How far do you think you'll go? Like 90% mobile? I mean, how deep?
So if you look at, it depends on what type of travel product. If you look at trains, it's already like 80, 90% mobile today. Activities, I think, will be in the same realm. Maybe complex travel, will still remain lower for a longer period of time. But even then, that will shift to voice interfaces, and that will ultimately be mobile. So I would say, the desktop, has a shelf life, and I think the clock is ticking at the end of the day. So I'd give it another 10 years, maybe at most.
Are you seeing any increase in mobile when looking at regions or even country-specific, maybe a country that's accelerating faster, like more Chinese folks are actually booking on mobile at a faster rate than other areas, or is it all kind of consistently growing at the same rate?
China is definitely the leader in the pack when it comes to mobile. They basically just jumped the entire desktop age, and they those guys are already on mobile, 70-80% of the people. The US is also very strong on mobile. I'd say Central Europe, Italy and Germany are a little bit the laggards. So it's taking us longer time to get comfortable to just be spontaneous and book something on a mobile device. The UK, on the flip side, and Europe is very interestingly, just the opposite. So the UK is actually the most mobile country in Europe, even more so than the United States. So we see very strong mobile trend there. So it really is a little bit, depends a little bit by country and their mobile ecosystem.
So GetYourGuide, when you founded it, what was the premise? What was the original problem that you wanted to solve with it way back in the day?
Oh, dude! Now you take me way back.
Because things have changed a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it changed a lot. So originally we were a peer-to-peer marketplace. Our idea was for students to get online and so basically host activities in a city, and the idea was that they could show other people a good time and earn a little incremental dollar for their living. But what we found out very quickly is that students did not have the time to do that, and they were not interested to upload tours. I think it's about the same thing that Airbnb realizes now as well with their offering, which is very similar to our original offering. And that is, people are either professionals or they do it very rarely and for a very high price point. And that was what prompted us to this market, because we realized a lot of the real suppliers of sightseeing and attractions and activities, they wanted to be listed on our platform. They had good price points, they had good availability and a very good product, but it was just not promoted properly. And that's when we flipped to GetYourGuide.com and opened the company and launched it in the way we're operating today.
Do you think that having Airbnb experiences and better distribution for tours and activities is going to really help maybe smaller players get in, or is tours and activities always just going to be fragmented and a little bit, just fragmented?
We certainly see professionalization of our space, so there are more bigger and better operators. There used to be a lot of big operators, but poor operators 20, 30 years ago when distribution was a means to an end for the tour operators. The tour operators today have died, and the old suppliers that they had have died alongside with them. Those were the guys who would drive you into souvenir shops and would have overpriced tours for terrible quality. They didn't survive the shift towards digital, because on GetYourGuide they just get very terrible reviews and people wouldn't book them. So we've really grown a complete new breed of suppliers, but those are all professional suppliers who get increasingly big on our platform alongside with us. I think there will be a place for smaller and fragmented suppliers as well that that we will be endorsing and also growing as we get better at personalization for people. So if we get better at recommending stuff for the people that have already been to Paris for 5 times and now are interested in wine and food, then the small supply I think also will be relevant. I don't anticipate that there will be a revolution where suddenly everyone will become a host and start to offer things to tourists. It's too complicated of a domain for that. And frankly, if you have a day job, what we found out time and again is people don't have the time and they don't do it. So I wouldn't see that. But in general, I would say Airbnb Experience is a great product, and I think they definitely put a big spotlight on our industry. So we can only be thankful for that.
Yeah, consistency matters. Kind of forget that if a guide is inconsistent and gets poor reviews, or quickly the digital world will push them aside.
If you look at the profitability of the product behind it, if you don't have an operation that is consistent and that is scalable in a way, it's not very profitable, and hence it cannot grow. So in that sense, the Experiences product as Airbnb stands today is not anything that is destined for scale. And I don't think it will work at 10x or 100x. But I think it's a good step in the right direction. I definitely expect those guys also moving more and more towards the mainstream market as they go along. Get the new OTA, where Brian Chesky says, we're just going to be an OTA. It's sure, they'll be an OTA, I think, like Expedia and like Booking.com, and they'll deal with all of the stuff that comes along with it. But
the marketing spend increases like Expedia had last quarter. It's wild to see the jumps.
If you want to be a mainstream company in travel, which ultimately you want to if you want to capture meaningful market share, then that comes alongside with it.
So let's wrap this interview up with a looking ahead question. So as you want to become the meaningful company, already meaningful, but even bigger and more scale, where do you see yourself the next midterm, let's say 2 years? Where are you headed and how are you going to get there?
I think for GetYourGuide it's very simple. We're clearly the leading product in the in-destination travel activities vertical. So anything that's sightseeing tours, day tours, excursions, attractions, we will just continue to sell at an ever-increasing scale, and internationalization really is the name of the game there. We have clearly locked down Europe at this point. We'll get into other geographies over the next 2-3 years, and we'll do that with an increasingly aggressive approach on the marketing side and an increasingly better product for the customers in order to improve our long-term viability as a brand. And that will be really the key focus of the company. I don't anticipate anything other than that over the next 2 to 3 years. I think that will keep us plenty busy.
Sounds like it. Thank you so much. Appreciate
Thank you so much,
Thanks for joining me. Absolutely. This is Nick Vivian. We are live from ITB. tnoozLIVE at ITB was brought to you by Travelaer, so thank you very much, and more soon.